The first and the foremost reason why animals move from one place to another is to find food. They go out in search of food because they cannot manufacture their food by themselves. They have to go out in search of food, so that is why the animals move from one place to another. That is the first and the foremost reason. The second is in search of shelter. Animals move from one place to another to overcome the inclement weather, to run away from the predators, to find safe haven for themselves so that they are not easily killed by the predators. So they move out in search of shelter, a safe place where they can live. That is the other reason why animals move from one place to another. Another important reason why they move is for mating, to find partners. Because one of the basic biological property of living organisms is to give rise to one of its own kind. So for this purpose, especially in sexually reproducing organisms, they require to find mate. And this, for mating purpose, for reproduction, they need to move from one place to another. You can take an example of a Solomon fish. A Solomon fish migrates from the seawater to a freshwater upstream to the place where it actually started its birth. So it has to travel such a long distance just for the purpose of reproduction. So for reproduction, for mating, for finding the correct partner also, movement is seen. Another important reason is for dispersal. If a particular group of organisms or plants live in one particular place, they tend to compete amongst themselves and finally they could be destroyed. So it is very important that they move out from one place from that particular place to the other surrounding places. So movement is also required, locomotion is also required for dispersal. Like migratory organisms, migratory birds, migratory animals, they move out to new locations to find where the environment is suitable so that they can survive in that new environment. Like if you take, for example, now the climatic conditions are changing vastly. So you will find, like down in the plains, it's extremely hot. So you'll find large number of birds that normally we find in the plains have migrated up to the hills where the weather is much more pleasant. So in search of new environment also animals move. So these are different reasons why animals locomote from one place to another: to find food, to find shelter, to run away from predators, to run for food, for mating, for dispersal, and for search of new location. Animals move from one place to another. They locomote, they show locomotion. Now, different types of locomotion that we see in animals. There are varied type of locomotory organs, so are there a varied type of locomotion. The first and the foremost we find in unicellular organisms like amoeba. In the case of amoeba, the movement is called Amivoid movement. In the case of amoeba, it is called Amivoid movement or Amivoid locomotion. In this case, it is very important to understand here that the cytoplasm that is there, the protoplasm that is there inside the body of inside the cell, has the ability to change from sol state to gel state. Sol means more liquid state and gel state means more solid state. In the case of amoeba, the amoeba extends its pseudopodia to the direction where it wants to move. Like take for example, this is the pseudopodia that has been extended to the direction it has to move. It has to move in this particular direction. It wants to move in this particular direction. So what happens here is all the protoplasm that is present inside are normally in both sol means more liquid and gel means more solid. So the protoplasm inside the cell can exist in sol and gel state. So what happens here is the entire protoplasm inside the body of amoeba changes into sol state and it flows into this particular direction. As the sol protoplasm flows into this starts swelling. And as it enters into this particular pseudopodia, the sol state of amoeba changes into gel state. The sol state of amoeba changes into gel state. And that is how the entire amoeba is pushed slightly forward. Similarly, now again it's pushed slightly forward. Pushed slightly forward. Now again, amoeba wants to move. What it does, it produces a pseudopodia. The protoplasm flows here as a sol state, and as it enters, it starts swelling. And slowly, the protoplasm changes into gel state. This is how amoeba slowly moves. I mean, you can say it literally creeps. This type of movement is normally seen in amoeba. It is called the Amivoid movement. Similar type of movement we see in the case of white blood cells when it passes through the intercellular spaces. But in the case of white blood cells, it is called diapedesis. Another important movement that we see is in the case of paramecium. Paramecium, another unicellular organism. Paramecium is also known as slipper animalcule. Slipper animalcule because its shape looks like a slipper. It looks like a slipper, that is why it is called slipper animalcule. It looks like this, that is why it is called slipper animalcule, and it has fine protoplasmic projections called cilia all around its body. So in this case, the cilia stroke in one direction and helps the amoeba, this paramecium to move like this. Like this. It moves like this in a wave-like motion because of the cilia. This type of movement is called ciliary locomotion. Ciliary locomotion. Now we see another type of locomotion in another unicellular organism. It is called flagellar. Flagellar in the case of Euglena. In the case of Euglena, we see this type of locomotion. They have a flagella. This is the flagella, with the help of which the Euglena moves. This is called flagellar movement. Now coming to the higher organisms, this is unicellular organisms. Coming to fish. In the case of fish, the main locomotory organs is not the fins. Remember, it is very important, we need to understand here that fins are not responsible for locomotion. It is the body muscles which is known as the myotome muscles. If you look at the fish, we have various fins here. Various fins. There are around about 7 fins, but these 7 fins are not involved in the process of locomotion. The structure that is involved in the process of locomotion is the segmentally arranged body muscles called the myotome muscles. In the case of fish, it is the segmentally arranged muscles called the myotome muscles. The myotome muscles are responsible for the movement of the fish. It is on the 2 sides of the lateral sides of the body, and the contraction of this and relaxation of the other side helps the fish to move in this fashion. So it is the myotome muscles which is responsible for the movement of in the locomotion in the case of fish. Now, what are the functions of the fins then? The first and the foremost, let's talk about the tail fin. The tail fin is responsible for steering the organism. Steering, that means it helps in changing the direction. It acts like a rudder. This is the tail fin. Tail fin is responsible for changing direction. It acts as a steering. Acts as a rudder. So that is the function of the tail fin. Then we have the dorsal fin. This dorsal fin helps the fish to move in the anterior direction. It helps the fish to move in anterior direction. It helps the fish to cut through the water. As such, the laterally compressed body and the spindle-shaped body helps the fish to cut through the water. The dorsal fin further facilitates this particular anterior movement of the fish. Then we have the pelvic fin, pectoral fin. Pectoral fin helps in maintaining the horizontal position of the fish. The fish has to remain horizontal because it is laterally flattened. There is every possibility of the fish turning like this. So it is the pectoral fin which helps the horizontal position of the fish. It helps to keep the fish in a horizontal position. Now the anal fin keeps the fish vertical. Keeps the fish in vertical position. The pectoral and the pelvic fin helps in pitching and yawing. These are the two different type of movements that we see in the case of fish. So basically, what we need to remember here is the locomotion in the case of fish is with the help of these muscles called the myotome. Now we talk about locomotion in the case of birds. In the case of birds, the locomotion is carried out by the wings, which is a modified forelimb. As we already know, it is a modified forelimb because its basic plan, that is the skeletal structure, remains that of a forelimb. And it is the wings, which is a modified forelimb. It has feathers and flight muscles. These three structures makes it possible for the birds to fly in air, which are also known as the glorified reptiles. As we know, wings are the modified forelimbs made up of bones, muscles, nerves, blood vessels and feathers. Now, the function of the wings, it continuously flaps with the help of which the birds can fly in air. It is the flapping of these wings, and we'll slowly understand how this flapping actually takes place. Now, wings which are meant for flapping. Now, the feathers. Feathers are important because it increases the surface area so that the wingspan of the bird increases and it facilitates the flying process. Feathers are of 4 different types. Feathers normally are called quills or flight feathers. They have a very strong rachis having barbules, and these barbules are interconnected. But we don't have to get into details of this. Let's talk about what are the different type of feathers. There are 4 different type of feathers. The first is called the remiges. Remiges are specially present on the wings, and these are known as the flight feathers. There are 23 in number in the case of Columbia leva, that is the pigeon. The remiges, these are large feathers which are basically present on the wings, and they help in the flight. They help in the flight by increasing the surface area. The other is the rectrices. Rectrices is the type of feathers that we normally find it in the tail region. You must have seen how does the tail help the bird. The tail not only helps to change the direction, it also helps the bird while landing. Whenever the bird comes down to the ground and lands, the tails are opened out like this, due to which a resistance is created, and it acts as if as a brake is applied and helps a safe landing of the bird. Or else the bird would die. If the bird directly lands on the ground, it would have crashed. These tails acts as the brakes, and the feathers that are present on the tail region is called the rectrices, which works as a brake and helps a safe landing of the birds. Then we have the coverts. Coverts are those feathers which are placed in between the remiges and the rectrices. It, you can say, fills up the space that is there between the remiges and the rectrices. These are known as the coverts. The last one is the counter feathers, which we normally call it as down feathers as well. These are present throughout the body. They are the general covering of the body, and the basic function of these counter feathers or the down feathers is to keep the bird warm. It helps the bird to keep the bird warm. That is the counter feathers. So that there are 4 different type of feathers. Now coming to the flight muscles: wings, feathers, and flight muscles. Flight muscles are, you can say, the most important structure as far as the wings is concerned, because it is these flight muscles which are responsible for the flapping of the wings, which helps the bird to fly. The pectoralis major. The first flight muscle is the pectoralis major, which is a large chunk of muscle which helps in the downward stroke, that is the power stroke, and it helps the bird to move forward and upwards. If you have noticed, when the wings flap, they are always flap in the figure of 8. That means at the end of the wings always follow a figure of 8. Figure of 8, which helps the bird to move forward and upward. And this pectoralis major is the large muscle which gives the power stroke, which helps the bird to move forward and upward. It is the power stroke, the downward stroke. Then we have the pectoralis minor. The pectoralis minor is a slightly smaller chunk of the muscle which helps the bird to elevate its wings during flight. Now, downward stroke is by the pectoralis major, but the wings has to go up again so that it can flap once again. Once again it can come down with a forceful contraction of the pectoralis major, with the help of which the bird can move forward and upward. So the pectoralis minor helps to elevate the wings in the upward direction. It helps especially in the upstroke. Downstroke by the pectoralis major, upstroke is by the pectoralis minor. Then we have 2 other muscles, the coracobrachialis. This is a type of muscle which helps the bird to fold its wings and keep it close to the body. This coracobrachialis helps the bird to fold its wing and keep it close to the body during rest or when it is not flying. Then we have the tensor muscles. Tensor muscles. These are a special type of muscles which keeps the wings spread out. If the wings are folded, then the bird cannot fly efficiently. So the tensor muscles keeps the wings spread out at the time of flight. So these are the different type of locomotions that we see in the unicellular, in the case of fish, and in the case of birds. In the next class, we will discuss about locomotion in the case of human beings. Thank you.